You can become a para-athlete at any given age. You have wheelchair fencers, world #1 and in their 50s.
Yeah.
And start playing. So it's nothing that yaar mere saath kyun hua, gosh. It's the people around them, I think, that have mentioned it. But never them. They'll be like, yaar, they might tell about, yaar, aaj practice kam ho raha hai. You know, instead of that, they'll be like, yaar, throw zyada hona tha aaj. Or if it's a runner, I'm like, yaar, aaj sirf itna hi 1.5 kilometer bhaga. I should have done 2 kilometers today. Thak kyun gaya main. But never about, you know, yaar, ye pair aisa ho gaya hai, soreness बढ़ गया, my wound has reopened.
Hello, everybody. So we have Dr. Ameya Kagali with us, who is the Chief Medical Officer of the Indian Paralympics contingent. Hello, Dr. Ameya.
Hello, ma'am.
Dr. Ameya has been the Chief Physician for the last Paralympics as well, and also the last Asian Games, Hangzhou 2023. And his body of work has been extremely diverse, and we are catching up to talk about the medical side of, you know, para sports persons and Paralympics. So, Dr. Ameya, why don't you tell our audience about the vast experience that you have, the New Zealand, and currently you're consulting with the Ramaiah Hospital?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to do this. So my journey goes back to by being post-MBBS, joining the armed forces, and always been around fit people and some injuries here and there. But then the stakes were different while in service. And then when I decided to do my postgrad in the field of sport and exercise, I saw a lot of potential, you know, in countries like Australia and New Zealand. Now India is definitely coming up in a big way, even for doctors. But what do I learn there? The practical applications were just phenomenal. And it was not things on paper and things on ground. The connect was very much evident, and I gained a lot of experience from that. And my first stint in the Indian sporting scenario happened with the Sports Authority of India in Bangalore. It was headed by a fellow serviceman. And that's where I got first exposed to what elite sport is all about in our own country. And a small group of individuals were training on a same ground in a wheelchair. And that really caught my attention. I'm like, who are these guys? What are they even doing? And, you know, because if I tell you somebody's on a wheelchair, you might portray something indoor or bedside and a couple of people, individuals helping them get off from place A to place B. But these guys were there warming up, doing a head rotation, their neck rotation, and so many fun activities as such, which really made me think, what exactly is this? And back then, the Tokyo Paralympics was very close on, and we were working in the space of COVID. So we were all in a bio bubble.
Yeah.
So no one could go out. And fortunately, unfortunately, they were all stuck with me, and vice versa. So that gave me a lot of insight as to what this para sport, this para universe is all about. And when I did more and more reading into it, the next thing I know is that I was appointed as the chief team physician for the Tokyo Paralympics. In para sport, as a medical doctor, you need to be very thorough with the neurological examination. And so what we are taught in second year is that whenever any patient comes to us with a complaint, you first examine the normal side. And now if you're dealing with an amputee, upper limb or lower limb, when there is no one side, so what do you do then?
Yeah.
You know, so it's all your expertise that take over and the application of examining a particular body.
So I'm sure your background and experience in the army has helped in this front.
100%, because it helps. First and foremost, it's all about communication. It's not important how much I know. It's more important how I give that information out to my athletes in the language they understand, in the condition they understand. So if I can use my medical jargon left, right, and center, even if I'm thorough with it, and if my athlete doesn't understand, there's no point.
Yeah.
Same thing in an environment where I'm with my soldiers. So the communication is so important, and that is where the army background comes in, where I need to connect with my boys and girls.
Yeah.
for them to have that belief in me that, that he'll help us out.
But commendable. I mean, your role is so important. Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing about the knowledge and your contribution. So coming back to, common people, they don't have much idea and much awareness. So let's go back to the basics, let's break it down for the audience and help them to understand how a para sports person is different from a sports person.
First and foremost, we need to redefine the term what normal is, right? If, again, breaking down. So in an event like the Olympics or the Paralympics, why are these events held? They are there for it to be competitive, to test performance. We are not there to see their impairments and their incapabilities. So first thing is that we need to have a level playing field pertaining to only the impairment. So that's where there's something called as classification, which is the cornerstone of parasport. And that is the main key difference between Olympics and the Paralympics.
So this year, India is sending a strong 84-membered contingent to the Paralympics, to the Paris Paralympics. So for our audience, to help you understand, Paralympics is organized by IPC, which is the International Paralympic Committee. And Paralympics is a competition where parasports persons are going and participating, and they are actually fighting for the gold, silver, and bronze that we have already seen in the Olympics, right? So, Dr. Ameya, if you can help our audience understand, the various levels and the classifications of how the various, disabilities are identified and termed, and there is a rule book according to which all the parasports persons has to compete and qualify.
So just to break it down for the audience, I'm sure everyone has seen the Olympics and they're following it. So to take a connotation from the Olympics, we have boxing, we have wrestling. There are again weight categories. So you have flyweight, heavyweights, right? So you will never find an 83 kilo person fighting a 50 kilo. Yeah. So it is 50 kilo versus 50 kilo. Similarly, in para sport, each and every para athlete has a medical condition. It can be congenital, which is at birth, or it can be acquired due to some unfortunate incident, a road traffic accident, which is very common, or an infection which has caused them to either become an amputee, or they have a traumatic brain injury, or they have a spinal cord injury, which has left a certain part of their body with certain amount of limitations physically. And in events like athletics and, say, swimming, you have all three factors involved. That is the physical impairment, the visual impairment, and the intellectual impairment. Whereas in some sport, like you have blind football, it doesn't matter about your physical and intellectual impairment. There's a criteria that certain visual impairment should be there for an athlete to participate or to become a part of the team participating for blind football. So each sport is unique in its own way. So some may see, like now we might have seen javelin throw, Neeraj Chopra winning the silver. So in that entire event of athletics, javelin was just one event. Now in para athletics, you have multiple javelin throwers. And that is being decided by a class, and the people who do it are called as classifiers. So there are medical personnel on the ground before and during the competition. So what happens is that the para athlete gets their medical documents to the classifiers. They have been diagnosed by their own doctors in their respective countries. It can be a neurosurgeon, it can be a physician, it can be an orthopedic surgeon, and their whole medical multi-specialty team, depending on which part of the body is affected. So we as classifier, I'm also in the classification space. We go through all the documents thoroughly, correlate with their radiological imaging if it's there, and we examine the athlete, a thorough examination of 40 to 45 minutes minimum, which is held in behind closed doors, where we have at least a minimum of 2 to 3 classifiers, again from different countries. You can't have the same, and none of the classifiers are the same country as the athlete. Okay. So it's a very neutral playing field there. Yeah. And that's just, again, one part of classification. Then we go on and ask the athlete to do the activities which he or she is competing in. So there's a on-bench test and there's an on-field test. So once this is concluded, then we first see if the athlete is meeting the MIC, that is the minimum impairment criteria. The example I'll tell you now, tomorrow if I just cut my index finger, technically that is also a physical impairment.
Yeah.
But I am not meeting the minimum impairment criteria to become a para-athlete.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? Now, I am an amputee, elbow, joint and below. That qualifies me to meet the minimum impairment criteria. And then I go on to categorize this athlete as to who are the competitors in that particular class. That's where athletics has the vast number of classifications because the events are that many.
Yeah.
And each sport has its own classifiers, own set of rules, own set of classification.
Interesting and complex too.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because there are sport, there are various categories under that particular sport,
Yes.
and then there are various classifications.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where I say that as a doctor, it becomes a little more challenging because you're seeing all the medical notes of the individual, you're examining the para-athlete, and then you're drawing a conclusion that yes, this athlete can compete in this category. And more often than not, that could not be the final category also, because there are certain conditions where the medical condition may worsen or improve. So, for example, if the athlete worsens, the spinal cord injury, or there's a bed sore which is happening, which has got infected just before the competition, which is hindering a movement of a particular athlete, the classification may have to be reconsidered. And so it's a very ongoing and
So, with
evolving
what
process.
frequency does this happen?
That again, ma'am, it varies upon the sport and the competition. Now, for example, in the Paralympics, few sport have already declared that there will be in competition classification too. Whereas some have told 2 months before the event, there will be no classification. And whatever categories have been allotted before, based on the athlete's ranking, they will compete in their respective events.
Okay, so which means that for certain categories and certain sport, there is a possibility that when the team is there in the Paris Games village,
Yes.
they might go through this,
Yes.
and if they are not qualifying, then they might have to return back.
They might not have to return back. They might have to compete in a category one above.
Okay, interesting.
Okay. So, see, it is a very fine line because, for example, if I tell you if there is a lesion in the spinal cord level T10 and somebody has it at T9. T is the thoracic level with the chest where it ends somewhere there. And an athlete cannot sense or the movements are restricted below. So the muscle activity of the abdomen is restricted. And there is a similar athlete with a lesion slightly higher. So it gets very difficult to classify everyone. So for example, if there is a particular event happening like say sitting shot put, and these athletes come with spinal cord lesions from the thoracic level to the lumbar level, sometimes we may not get as many athletes in that category.
Yeah, I was about to ask
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So it's just like, it's a little unfortunate because we can't have too many classes. Then we are diluting the competition.
Yeah.
And if we have too less classification, we might end up being unfair to a person with a little more impairment than the other.
Right.
So it's a trade-off. It's a fine balance.
Yeah.
And it's still very, unless it's an amputee, which is clear cut and it may not worsen or better. It's very difficult, especially for spinal cord injuries. It gets a little tedious.
Yeah. So, Dr. Ameya, do you think there is enough awareness among common people, among the common masses that, a parent with a 10-year-old with a certain disability, generally, how our society is designed, it's seen in a very bad way, right?
Yeah.
And it's seen as if it's the end of the life.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine the amount of confidence that these parasports person would get just by playing, right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about it because there is not enough awareness. So what can we do to at least bring this to a very base level, right? Not seeing it in such a negative light.
Yeah. So what we can start off is that by just promoting sport irrespective of the condition. See, I don't think there's any harm done ever due to physical activity. So even when there's a child, if the development delays are very evident, and if they start going for their sessions of rehab, which is great, keep at it without, thinking too far ahead. So develop the muscles which can be developed. So once you're doing that more often than not, you are bound to be fit to play any sport. Then you can boil down and specialize into whatever you feel align in your interests and your impairment and the facilities, of course, which are available around you. So the first thing is that focus on physical activity and not just functional movement. Now we set the bar only so low that yaar, ye beta chalna seekh gaya to theek hai. So we need to come out of that mindset because you don't know what the human child is capable of.
It comes from a place of pity as well in the society.
Absolutely.
Which is the most, it's extremely sad.
Absolutely. So pity, and one thing which I don't like to associate with parasport is sympathy. Trust me, none of my athletes, the way I deal with a lot of able-bodied athletes also. So the treatment I give, not just medically, but even figuratively speaking, it's just the same. My communication to either of them, it's no differentiation from my side. If I'm pushing an athlete to do his best, I'll push even a para-athlete to do his best, just that I might observe him a little more because of his impairment, but that's about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of years ago, I was traveling in Bangalore Metro, and actually I saw Farman Pasha. He was taking the metro. This was around Sai.
Yes,
if I'm not wrong. Yeah, and in fact, I felt so good, and he was all independent.
Yeah.
I tried to not make it uncomfortable to him. So I just walked up to him and had a very hi casual chat. So on a societal level, that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. You just have to, if they're an athlete, acknowledge their presence because they're representing a state or a country. You give them the due respect. And just, if you want to show keen interest in their life, go ahead and speak to them.
Yeah.
They are our own species. They are one amongst us. There's nothing to be afraid of or skeptical of or anxious about, or how do we approach? Break those barriers which are present not anywhere else but in our minds.
Yeah. It's important to talk about the infrastructure assistance which exists in the country for parasports persons.
Yeah.
So is it, whatever it is right now, is it okay as per you, or do we have to do a lot more?
See, I would agree and disagree to an extent. When I agree, it's like, yes, it is obviously not as much as it's used to. Now, I can't ask my para-athlete to catch a bus and go from point A to point B in Bangalore. That is ridiculous. And in spite of Bangalore being one of the most prominent cities in India.
Yeah.
So if it's not there here, you can imagine other places what's happening. So it's definitely a work in progress, but I'm the one who sees the glass half full. So coming to the facilities, I was in Sai there. We made sure that the athletes got the ground floor to themselves. Then there were ramps provided. But also you should take into account that how many athletes are training there.
Yeah.
And I would also like to point out, it's something so basic, where are the washrooms for the athletes? And this was a very real life incident which happened while I was in Tokyo. Now we're talking about India, right? So I'll give an example of the highest level of competition. There's a call room which happens, and I was just assisting one of the athletes on the wheelchair, and he's a case of spinal cord injury, so he wears diapers. He doesn't have bowel and bladder control. So I just asked him, it was quite hot, almost 35 degrees Celsius, and I just asked him if you want water. And his instant reply was that प्यास तो लगी है, लेकिन मेरा diaper पूरा गीला हो चुका है. Because then that whole change of diaper, we have to take him for 10 minutes to the nearest washroom. Not that the washroom is very far. Take him there, he will change, do his thing, come back. He's not around half an hour.
And he was able to do on his own?
And he was able to do everything on his own.
Okay.
But just the time factor. Now we need to plan not just for those ramps out there, but even the portable washrooms in the training facility.
Yeah.
Where they are training the ground, if it's a shot put, if it's javelin, if it's a running event, how close or how far are these mandatory facilities for a para-athlete? So that needs a bit of attention, and I'm sure, things once they pick up. And India boasts of one of the finest hospitals in the country. So inevitably, all the hospitals automatically become para-friendly hospitals, right? So these are the centers that can be explored.
And our sports centers, and especially where the para sports persons are training, they have the required infrastructure.
Again, it's too few and too far. I believe Gandhinagar Sai is one center which is dedicated exclusive to parasport. I haven't been there, so I won't comment on ground. I can stick to Sai Center in Bangalore, where there are these facilities which are there, but definitely there can always be room for improvement, especially for the testing aspect. And coming into the medical center, how easy it is for them. For them to come and, get access to even a recovery session. How high is the physio bench? Can it be adjustable or not? So these are very small things which, even if it's not available in an able body setup, काम नहीं रुकेगा. But when you're dealing with a para athlete, there could be a massive jolt in your planning. And for reasons so trivial. So that's where I think, centers across the India, both government, non-government, private, all can just, slightly, that's where the bar should be raised. In terms of technology, in terms of facilities.
The first reform and change that we all should aspire is that, seeing them as sports persons too.
Yes, absolutely.
You come across any of the para sports person, the first thing that comes to your mind is that it's a lot more sympathy, and why do we all say that? They are a lot more inspirational. There is this underlying tonality with which we talk, which is, it's not necessary that they will like it. Right? And talking a little bit about this, because you have spent so much of time with them, what is their commitment like? Because do you see them anytime cribbing about their condition or complaining about it?
About their condition, never. That's the beauty of it, and that's how I enjoy in that space, because that teaches me so much about gratitude. Just the fact that you and me can get up and go brush our teeth and go our daily job, it takes hardly 15, 20, 30 minutes max. For them, it's an ordeal right from the get up. So from a supine position to get up straight itself is a battle. And then they go about their job. So it's nothing that, yaar, mere saath kyun hua, gosh. It's the people around them, I think, that have mentioned it. But never them. They'll be like, yaar, they might tell about, yaar, aaj practice kam ho raha hai kya? Wow. Instead of that, they'll be like, yaar, throw zyada hona tha aaj. Or if it's a runner, I'm like, yaar, aaj sirf itna hi 1.5 kilometer bhaga. I should have done 2 kilometers today. Thak kyun gaya main? But never about, yaar, ye pair aisa ho gaya hai, soreness बढ़ गया, my wound has reopened. Because they are sitting on a wheelchair for so long, they have pressure sores. And because they are physically active people, they sweat. So it's a very, it's not a good news as a medical professional, mixing sweat and that area gets infected. So we have to clean it, sometimes have to debride it, again put your antibiotic ointment, creams, powders, and get them ready the next day again. So if an able body gets up at 7 or 6 to start training, our ladies and gentlemen need to get up at 4 in the morning. Just to see the packs are there in place, diapers are fresh, and then they do their daily task. So in all this, they tell me, ये planning से फुर्सत नहीं मिलती है, वो बाकी negative सोच से क्या करेंगे?
There's so much to learn from this.
Absolutely. Just the way they go about their life. I'm telling you, they don't even need to take the field. The best way to observe an athlete is to observe his off-field or hers off-field activities.
And in terms of the support, because we are talking about this, I have now a lot more clarity after what you have spoken, that the kind of support these sports persons need, obviously it requires a lot more capital and fund as well, right?
Yes.
And if you see the investment from be it private system or the other stakeholders of the entire ecosystem, it's way lesser. So that has to go up, and go up from a position of the intention that they really want these sports person to go and win at these mega sporting events.
Right? Absolutely. And funding is one aspect. and after that, how you utilize those funds.
Yeah.
So there are two. It's a trade-off again. You can do it's when you buy a certain product, you'll see, is it really worth it, right?
Yeah.
So when you're spending on someone, it's not that is it really worth spending on the athlete. It's the aid that you're providing. It's always, I firmly stand by this phrase that it's not about the machine, it's the men and women behind the machine. You might have the best of equipment, best of facilities out there, but you don't know how to use it or what to do with that kind. Then it's all going to waste. So there should be a beautiful confluence of these things which come into place, which aids an elite athlete or a para-athlete. So even right from the prosthesis, which take for example Sumit Antil, now post the Tokyo win, the kind of prosthesis he uses is top notch.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a big difference. And again, in our country, it's like, you know, only after somebody reaches a certain level, he creates the buzz. Then, you know, we are there to make that buzz louder.
See, ideally, Sumit Antil would have been provided this before he won.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That's the ideal.
Yeah. That's the ideal way. But again, it's the commercial aspects. I'm not the person to comment on those things. But it's easy to say. I mean, there might be 3-4 more people like Sumit Antil.
Yeah.
Right. So how many more do you provide like that?
Right.
Now that he's become an icon in javelin, in para javelin.
Yeah.
You know, I would consider him, I don't want to make comparisons, but currently he's the world champion.
Yeah.
And in Tokyo Paralympics, he not only threw the javelin, he created a world record. And ever since, I think he's broken the world record thrice. So that's just incredible.
And he has a swag of his own.
Absolutely.
You know, the moment he will walk up to the room, you will see that the champion attitude.
Absolutely. A champion has arrived, and a very humble champion has arrived. You know, which speaks a lot about him as both as a player, and again, my same comment that, you know, you can tell a lot about the athlete when he or she is off the field, when you interact, when no cameras are there. And I've been very lucky to have spent so much time with these boys and girls when nobody's around, that, you know, you get a sense of, you know, how will they perceive whatever you have to say to them. And majority of them have been very kind, very gracious.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible.
Absolutely. So this is for the sponsors / brand people, whoever is watching this video. Your role is extremely important in increasing the popularity of the sport, right? So I would strongly recommend, signing up para sports persons as your brand ambassadors and stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, they're very worth the effort, and they will bring laurels to the country, and they'll be great ambassadors, not just India as a country, but for the human race. I always like to think big and look at the larger picture. And if there's a larger picture, look at even bigger the picture. So these are your men and women who will just set such high examples that, it's just difficult for you and me even sitting here and to even contemplate on how big that they can become. And you mentioned certain names, right? So these are really big. Now, apart from the 84 athletes, more than 50% are already crorepatис.
Yeah.
So which is great for the sport. And it's great to create the awareness. Now, even an urban child in Bangalore, when they come to me, that's where I'm based. I guide them to just focus on physical activity and start playing. Just start playing whatever sport you want. And then we'll decide whether to maneuver it. And the best part about parasport is that there's no age group. There's no age limit. You can become a para athlete at any given age. You have wheelchair fencers, world number 1, at their 50s. Men and women, that is. So that's how incredible and how beautiful the whole environment is.
So, Dr. Ameya, we are sending 84-member contingent, and recently Devendra Chacharya said that we might come back with 25 medal. It's ambitious, but it's definitely possible,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about, as a sports doctor, as a chief medical officer of the Indian Paralympics contingent, how does your preparation look like?
So far, so good. And of course, if the president has made a statement, there's no better person to make that statement, because he himself has set such high examples, and he's been an achiever throughout and a very a great role model. And whereas my preparation has come is that it's in quite full swing actually. There is a recovery room which is already set up, and I'm supposed to go and take charge out there. We have a wonderful team of physiotherapists who will be accompanying me. And we are in touch, definitely in touch, as to how we can cater to the on-ground needs because it's a foreign country. And as I told you about parasport, it requires that much bit more planning. We need to plan their commute also, even within the village and across in the venue. And the facilities are available even by the French government. So there are polyclinics set in the village, and there's a venue medical staff in each venue.
Yeah. And how are the athletes preparing themselves just before the Paralympics, and especially from the sports medicine point of view?
I think they are the thing about parasport with the Indian contingent is that it's a very individualized event. We don't have a team sport.
Yeah.
So they are spread across the country. They're training. Most of them are in touch with me. So it gives me a lot of confidence that they have confidence in me. So that's, and I'm sure that they're giving their best and they know how big the event is. And most of our athletes are veterans in that space. And for all the first timers, I would just do your thing. Whatever you've been doing till date has brought you to where you are. And there's no need for any changes at this point in time. And just give it your best shot. And we're all there for you.
How do you, being a doctor, how do you tackle the uncertainties that can happen in the village?
So to answer your first question, first thing is that uncertainties are inevitable. I will be living in a fool's world if I go with a plan and stick to the plan from point A to point B. I need to be flexible. And the second most important is communication. So these are the key takeaways, staying in a village and going from venue to venue, that I need to have the administrative backup. I need to keep them informed. I need to keep the athlete informed and my team informed. And I expect the same. So communication is a two-way thing. So if these 2-3 things are sorted, even if there is an uncertainty, I'm not too worried because we know we can take it from there.
I actually wanted to talk to you about, the doping possibilities.
Yep.
So this is one subject where
I think we can do a whole session just on doping. But yeah, it's a very sensitive topic. But just to break it down, to make it very, very simple for our listeners and viewers, doping is not synonymous with steroids. There are multiple facets towards doping. There are multiple rules which are clearly mentioned on an open forum, and the same rules have been conveyed to all the athletes representing the country, representing the state, time and again, as to what one can do and what one shouldn't be doing in competition, out of competition, in wherever you are. And trust me, it is not a very tedious task, provided the right guidance is given.
So this doping and sports person have this tug of war happening all the time, right? To an extent that often we come across this statement from athletes that unko pata nahi chala, ya fir, they weren't aware enough.
Yeah.
So my question to you is this true that they weren't aware enough?
See, ma'am, it's a few years back, this statement would have held some truth in it. But in today's time with the information, I know, I can get access to information at my fingertips anywhere I am. And there's not a single person without a smartphone right now.
Yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So if that is there, they are just a phone call away, just a message away, just an information, just a click away from whatever they need to know about doping. And one thing I would like to tell the athletes is that consider the whole doping rules and regulation as a part of your training and not anything which is additionally, entrusted upon you. No. The diet you eat, the sleep, the training, everything is towards performance enhancement. Similarly, knowing about the doping rules is also towards performance enhancement.
Yeah.
It is not a separate entity.
So let's talk a bit about, we have spoken about the infrastructure, how the bodily functions, the recovery. How does the mental health aspect of a para sports person function? Like, for example, with the contingent, is there any mental health coach or an expert who is traveling with the team?
With this Paralympics, I don't think that there is a mental health conditioning coach traveling with the team. And at least as far as my knowledge goes, it's not there. Unless they've added somebody, I don't know, in the support staff. But that's definitely one area which needs to be looked at. And the role also of the mental conditioning coach shouldn't be someone who's just come a day before and joined the team.
Yeah.
Right. He or she, I'm sure there are some wonderful psychologists across the country who are willing to work in the field of sport. I personally know a few. I personally refer some athletes to them, but it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Just because the whole medical and paramedical profession, the crux is trust.
Yeah.
So I would like the expert or the professional to be with the athletes for a decent duration of time, so that your high hello is out of the window. You get to the crux of the matter as early as possible. And in competition, you don't have time.
Yeah.
You're always everybody's always on the run. You might
Don't have
think,
time to bond.
absolutely, you might think like, I'm off for 2-3 weeks. Oh, Paris, great. No, you won't get time to sleep there.
Yeah.
Something or the other event is happening.
Yeah.
So even the professional staff, in this case, the psychologist, needs to know at least what is classification, what is their impairment, what is the psych. Again, the off-field study of an athlete is so important. And then they can value add so much to the contingent. It's enormous.
Yeah. Right. So, Dr. Ameya, what is the most obvious question from my end is that, what do you think? How many medals are we going to bring back home?
I think I'll be a little biased to my president and just, won't tread that path. So my achievement would be all my participants, the 84 of them, without putting a number, although I come from a numbers background, should hit their personal best in the event.
Yeah.
And if they hit their personal best of the event, there'll be a lot of medals.
Great. Hopefully that is going to happen. So what role do you think the sports audience and audience in general can play in parasports person's life?
First is that start watching sport and get to know the sport. Like now, courtesy the whole wrestling fiasco, people know about wrestling. The best thing that can happen is people know about it. I mean, I'm not saying that controversy is necessary for people to know.
Correct.
But just know the game. Get involved. You watch IPL, great. You watch the World Cup, fantastic. You've seen the Olympics, great. Now start following even the Paralympics. Because that is also competition, that is also sport. Your own countrymen and countrywomen are representing the Indian flag. And trust me, very few things are worth so much of pride than playing for your country. And the national anthem is going to be played at Paris Paralympics. So please do watch Paralympics.
Yeah. On that note, we'll end the interview. Thank you, Dr. Ameya, for coming and speaking with us. And there's so much of knowledge that we have garnered today for our audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fahim. Thank you.
Thank you.